not a YouTuber, just like making videos, you know. And I woke up early this morning to do this video. You know what I'm saying? Too much fluffery going around. Now, a guy by the name of Stefan Marinus, a dude with a French Canadian name. I'm gonna put his video down in the description box. And he made a video called the truth about slavery. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, and then he had like a black person as an avatar. So I'm like, okay, I'm down. You know what I'm saying? Let's see what this guy has to say. You know, and how it really, but it was this guy's own revision version of slavery. Now you can check his video out. I advise you watch his video before watching mine, because I'm going to completely, you know what I'm saying, tear into his logic, because you know, and that's what that's what I do. It's what I'm good at. It's what I'm supposed to do. I figured out I actually do a better job in ripping apart people's dissertations, as I'll say, than conveying my own thoughts and my own opinions. But yeah, I'm like, his argument was filled with so many fallacies, mistruths, and half-truths. Now, he did speak a lot. He hit some points. I'm not saying that everything in his video was non-fiction, but he didn't elaborate more. If you speak the truth, he'll stop at a certain point. You know, so it was like I was listening to him, and I know a lot of white people are trying to do revisions about slavery and what happened and so forth. But this guy, I don't know where he got his information from, and you know, and he wasn't citing any real sources of where he got his information from. And you know what I'm saying? I saw the video yesterday, and I messaged him, and I sent him a PM, and I said, you know, get back with me. I would like to do my research to know, but he hasn't gotten back with me because he's. I'm like, yeah, this was a doozy. Now, I'm not saying this dude's a racist, but you know, the funny thing is, and the thing is, this guy got a lot of subscribers, and this video has, for the last time I saw it, over 50,000 views. And may get a bunch of thumbs up. That's what I said. YouTube is filled with bullshit. I don't give a fuck about views. Anybody who cares about views are a goddamn joke. Because I know for a fact this video will probably reach 150, maybe 160 views, even though I'm going to give you the bare bones facts. You know what I'm saying? And encourage you to do your research yourself. And I'm going to tell you my sources and make reference, unlike that dude. But, you know what I'm saying, you know, nobody's going to pay attention to my videos or whatever. I'm not going to get, you know what I'm saying, a whole bunch of people in the comment section like, that means YouTube is a fucking joke. I'm to the point now where when I see videos with a bunch of thumbs down, I'm like, man, that dude he's speaking the truth. I'm seeing, you know, videos with a whole bunch of thumbs up and you know what I'm saying, whole bunch of views. I'm like, okay, that's fallacy. You know what I mean? He's trying to sell you something and so forth. So I'm going to look for the obscure video with the thumbs down. Now that's the only way. When I think about these YouTube, when I think about Tommy Sotomayor and his fucking rhetoric and how he gets thumbs up, YouTube is, I'm like, it's nothing to take seriously and so forth. Alright, nobody wants to hear, you know what I'm saying, accurate information. People want to cling on to whatever, you know what I'm saying, information that strokes their ego or tickle their fancy. That's what they want, you know what I'm saying? You got these guys peddling a bunch of easy answers. You know, nobody wants to deal with the truth because the truth hurts. The thing is, when it comes to black people, we're forced to digest every single negative connotation about us and so forth. And when we take it, we take it with stride. You know, we take it in consideration. But white people don't. They can't take criticism and so forth. They can't, you know what I'm saying, own up to what they've done. So now you got these idiots going and trying to revise history, revise what's going on in slavery so white people can feel good about themselves. Because these people don't like white guilt. But to me, that is truly white guilt. when you have to go around, when you have to create fallacies about what happened in slavery and so forth. But you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna get into it. That's why I named this video "The Lie of the Revision of Revision Slavery," and so forth. Now, this guy does make some points, but here, let's get into it. Now, he says that slavery is all about power. I agree with him. I agree with him 100%. You know what I'm saying? Ultimately, it's about power. Power over a group of people over another. I'm not going to argue with that. But the transatlantic slave trade, the slave trade that we've fell victim to, race was race was a factor. It may have not started off as a factor before, but you know what I'm saying? It was a slid in there. It was like a justification for slavery. You know what I'm saying? Along with the Bible, but race played a key role. And he says it's just about power. And that's the thing. See, when white people talk about blacks captured other blacks in slavery and so forth, and I agree with him. I'm like, yeah, because it's a power thing. It wasn't a race thing. It wasn't like these black people in Africa was all, they was all holding hands and like, oh, you're my brother. No, it was about tribe. People back then didn't think about race or skin color. You know what I'm saying? These were foreign terms. You know what I'm saying? These white people created these type, you know what I'm saying, categories of white, black, brown, and yellow. You know what I'm saying? In India, they had the untouchables and so forth. But whites created a flawed system called race that they themselves now have a hard time defining. So I would say, yeah, it was about power. And the thing is with white people, you know, so I'm not putting this dude who made this video in a category as some sort of extreme racist and so forth, but this dude must know that with his inaccurate dissertation that it's going to attract a lot of racists. It's going to attract a lot of white people that's going to want to point fingers at black people and say, it wasn't really that bad, you know what I'm saying, learn your facts and so forth, and he will understand why. And this dude's a libertarian, oh Lord, and he will understand why people like Jared Taylor and the American Renaissance, which is an extremely racist group, will cling on to this video and so forth, and why there's going to be racist trolls. That's the reason why I didn't want to name my video a response to the truth about slavery. Not yet, because I don't want to deal with his fucking trolls coming over, because the trolls had already found my libertarian realist videos, and trust me, I still got some heat for the libertarian reptile, because this dude is just a fucking slug. But yeah, and so forth. So we agree slavery was a power thing. So, but if Africa, you know what I'm saying, if there was so much slavery going on in Africa, what were the Africans using slaves for? It's, white people always say we come from dung huts and don't have didn't have a written language. But then they say, well, slavery it was in Africa. So therefore, if slavery was in Africa, you have to admit that there were kings walking around with silk robes, you know what I'm saying, living in palaces, sitting on thrones, had power, had technology, you know, because that all comes with slavery. They had some sort of knowledge, systems of mathematics, system of chemistry, just like you would say that the Roman Empire, you know what I'm saying, was an advanced civilization for its time. You say these African empires like Timbuktu and I'm saying it wrong, Songhia, you know what I'm saying, also. But we do have to differentiate slavery in Africa than slavery in America, or the transatlantic slave trade. What was in the transatlantic slave trade was chattel slavery. And I advise people to look up chattel slavery as the ownership of property. A lot of the slaves in Africa was like serfdom and occupational caste. You know what I'm saying? Slaves, for the most part, from all documents, were treated decent, treated better than the slaves in the colonies. Sometimes slaves even have more rights than a citizens. A slave can marry a free person. They can, so it's more intricate. You can't just say, oh, they're slaves. We need details. details. This guy didn't go in detail. See, white people, you know what I'm saying, when they claim to have these IQs and this intelligence, and when they want to talk about physics and all this other things, they want to go into great details and so forth. So then when it comes to the slave trade, oh no, things are different now. But so hence, if white people, and that's the thing, see, when white people do something good, when they advance civilization, when they create the first in flight, or they claim to be the first to create a democratic system, the first to do this, you know what I'm saying, study aerodynamics, you know, but they'll pat themselves on the back and say, oh, this is the genius of Western civilization and so forth, of the Western man, that we created this, and but when it comes to things that bad that they do, they're like, oh well, everybody does it. See what I'm saying? See, they want to be unique in certain fields, but when it comes to something that brings them shame, they're like, well, everybody does that. You know what I'm saying? So hence, why can't I just say that, hey, everybody created technology and everybody had their system of mathematics and so forth? What makes the white man unique? The white man feels that he's unique, that his societies are unique. But when it comes to slavery, he's not unique. He does everything like everybody else does. He was strolling down the coast of Africa, and they just had big for sale signs and so forth. Now, I'm not denying African rulers' involvement in the slave trade. You know what I'm saying? It's horrible. Now, the guy who made this video, you know, kept contesting that, oh yeah, it's horrible, it's immoral, it's deplorable. So, you know what I'm saying? But still, he's still sneaking in these jabs saying, it was a horrible thing, but us white people, we wasn't really involved in it. And now one thing I'll give him props for, he was talking about the Arabs and the Muslims. Yes, the Arabs and the Muslims were heavily involved in the slave trade, and nobody hardly mentions them. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going to do a video on that. So that's why I don't like Christianity, and I'm not fond of Islam either. You know what I'm saying? There are both religions that were heavily involved in the slave trade and slavery and so forth. You know what I'm saying? People can manipulate the Quran just like they manipulate the Bible. You know, they're really two sides of the same coins, if you ask me. Two sides of the same coin. This may be a pretty long video, but he also goes into, now we all know that, yeah, of course, and you know what I'm saying, and the fact that the Arabs was involved in the slave trade, you know, also helps, you know what I'm saying, our case, because, you know what I'm saying, it wasn't just Africans capturing other Africans, it was also Arabs capturing other Africans and selling them to the white man and so forth. So it's just about different nations capturing other nations. And the thing with Arabs are Caucasian. They're Caucasian people. You know what I'm saying? Not all Caucasians have white skinned and blue eyes and so forth. But here's the kicker. He said that if a slave was captured, it would have been better for them to go west instead of east. Meaning, if you was captured, a slave was better off getting on that boat and going across this transatlantic, or could go east of the Sahara Desert or north of the Sahara Desert. You know what I'm saying? And I tried to find research on it, and I couldn't. But I can show you a picture of the Saharan slave route, and it went all over the place. And so forth. So it wasn't these two. He made it seem like there's these two directions. Oh, it's just east and then there's west. Oh, you can say it stay there. But if a slave was captured way in west, way in East Africa, you know what I'm saying, he can just go further east, or he'll be going west, but not west to the seaport and so forth. You see what I'm saying? But he said that the fatality rate of slaves migrating, you know what I'm saying, east of Sahara, upper and east to the Arabic nations, was 80%. I couldn't find any information on that. And then he said the fatality rate of Africans getting on that slave boat was 10%. That is a fucking lie. That is the fatality rate of slaves on the slave boats was documented upwards to 50 and 40%. There's no documentation of the fatality rate of slaves being marched across the sub-Sahara. They said that the Arabs and other Africans would kill them and castrate. Okay, what was the point of capturing slaves if you're going to kill 80% of them? If 80% of them, and then he didn't cite no references. When you make such bold claims like that, you need to source a couple of freaking references. And at that point, that's so bold that you have to also reference African scholars on top of that. But of course he didn't. You know, because as I said, this dissertation was to make white people feel good. To be like, oh, it wasn't so bad. So basically he was like, you know what I'm saying, getting on the slave boat, it was the lesser of two evils. You know, that's why I'm like, his video is freaking outrageous. But the whole thing is that white people had slave forts, and if there was this, like, he's some battle between Arabs and white people over slaves, and then he goes a whole spiel about the history of slavery, Romans had slavery and all this stuff. I don't really give a shit about that because we know about this. We're talking about here in America. I'm saying, because America claimed to be so unique, the land of the free. So let's focus and not focused on all these other kingdoms and so forth. Because any educated person would know that slavery existed in other places. And then he talked about all the white people that were taken into slaves in northern Africa and so forth by Arabs. But then that's your gripe with Arabs, okay? I said, whereas black people taking you into slaves, was you help black people build you mud huts. And if black people did take you as slaves, I'm not saying that, you know what I'm saying, we had the black Moors and so forth and they didn't have any sort of white servants or whatever. But he's trying to compare it to, like, just like I said, he's trying to minimize the path of the transatlantic slave trade and trying to maximize all these white people that were put in slaves and so forth. Now, I do know about the Captain Raleigh's Chronicles about an American ship captain and his crew which crashed amongst the shore of West Africa and were taken into slaves by Arabs. But it was also an Arab that got Captain Raleigh his freedom and got him back to the United States and so forth. So okay, so we know white people didn't, you know what I'm saying, didn't have the goal or couldn't survive Africa to go inside there to grab slaves. But we know later on white people did colonize Africa. They were all up in Africa. You know what I'm saying? They were in places like Kenya and South Africa. So I'm like, with white people going into Africa, eventually they used black people to teach them how to survive in it. Just like white people coming here to America. You know what I'm saying? Eventually they knew that they were going to have to go inside deep in Africa and colonize and get that wealth and so forth. So don't get this bill like, oh, white people, yeah, at a certain point white people didn't go into Africa, but then they eventually journeyed all inside and colonized and built houses and had families and so forth and built churches. But I'm like, that's and also I'm gonna get into that later. But yeah, he said that a slave was better off going west and east. He also talked about, you know what I'm saying, how slaves were treated, you know what I'm saying, so better, so good and so forth. Like, it was almost like he was saying that it would have been better off if a slave got captured than in his home and land where slaves are being were human sacrifices. Blacks were just killing each other and so forth. But he also went into the British, and a lot of people talk about how the British and these white abolitionists, how they abolished slavery and so forth. Oh, white people, the good humanitarians and so forth. You know what I'm saying? They will be our persecutors and our saviors. You know what I'm saying? They will be our villains and be our heroes, just like the comic books. But let me roll you this clip here.
Slavery was abolished. The abolitionists had won, a sense of triumph. I think they also felt that that question, am I not a man and a brother, was answered.
The abolitionist response to that great question was that although men and brothers, black people were lesser men and lesser brothers.
I think in that moment, the dominant perspective is of a hierarchical racial order, but one in which it's a question of culture and civilization. They certainly do not think that black people are equal to them at this time. They think...
You see, in that little clip there, it talks about even though we were freed from slavery and white people went on a campaign because they felt that we were all God's children, afterwards we still have problems because white people was like, okay, they're not slaves, but they can't be civilized. And so then they went right back into slavery as a term called forced labor. And forced labor was just a fancier term for slavery, because when they abolished slavery, like, okay, slavery is abolished. But a lot of these black people that was controlled by these British colonies, they said, well, we're going to put them in forced labor, which is not that bad, and then put them in some sort of apprentice where they had to be slaves for about 2 more years. See what I mean? They had to learn something. They had to learn its trade. But while learning that, they had to be slaves for 2 years, and they called them apprentices. So there's it's a whole slippery slope. You really have to do in-depth research on the subject. If you let some white dude, you know what I'm saying? And I'm telling you this right now, I never made any type of threats here on YouTube, but this fucking white dude needs to be killed for making this video and so forth. But this is how flustered I am, you know what I'm saying? It's, you know what I'm saying? I'm flabbergasted. But you have to. But also he went into the, you know what I'm saying, the British had the most powerful navy, and when the British abolished slavery, they patrolled up and down the African coast. And anybody caught trying to transport slaves and so forth, that they'll face penalties. You know, some say the penalties was they'll go to prison, or if these slave traders was part of another nation, they'll hit them with fines or whatever. I'm like, well, if you're transporting slaves and all they're going to do is fine you, I'm like, okay, I'll take the fine, but I'm going to make the money back with trading these slaves anyway. But you know what I'm saying, the white dude, Stepfen or whatever, the dude who made this ridiculous video was talking about how noble white people were, you know what I mean, like, oh, we abolished slavery and we patrolled the coast, so we made sure no slaves was coming out of there, so forth. No, the reason why the British did that when they wanted to control slavery going into the Americas, because they did not want the Americans to gain power at that time. It wasn't like they were being so malevolent and so forth. They simply, you know what I'm saying, they knew the more the Americas, Brazil and America, get slaves, and they can manufacture products or give out export products cheaper than British. So it was a power thing. You know what I'm saying? They simply did not want them to get slaves to grow in power. It wasn't like the British had all these high morals and so forth, like, oh, this is a crime against humanity and so forth. So hence, even while the British was abolishing slavery or whatever, they were going into Africa. Africa, and they were going into the Australia, Tasmania, and wiping those dudes out. So hence, when it comes to white people, when it comes to those colonial times, those horrific times, what I consider the Dark Ages, white people consider the Dark Ages when white people was running around in cellars in Europe and they was infected by the Black Plague or whatever, or some shit, because they didn't know how to take baths. No, that wasn't the Dark Age. The colonial area, when they were expanding, that was our Dark Age. But yeah, you know what I'm saying, I almost lost track here. I've got a lot of passion here, as you can see. But they so you know what I'm saying, that was their thing. You know what I'm saying, to stop Americans from getting slaves, to stop them from getting power, and so forth. Now, going on. Now, another thing he talked about black slave owners. And let's get into this subject matter. And he says, he made some kind of ridiculous assertion. He said that 26% of black people, 26% of the slaves, you know what I'm saying, the slave drivers, was the people who owned slaves in this country were black. That is a lie. That is a complete fallacy when I did my research on it. there were black slave owners, and out of the 2 million so documented slaves here, the black slave owners owned a total of 10,000 of all the black slave owners. 10,000 out of 2 million. So do the math, do the percentile of that. That's like freaking 1%, less than 1%. So you mean 20% of the 20% of all the people who had slaves, you know what I'm saying? Slave owners were black. But yet and still, they own less than 1% of all the slaves. That makes no fucking sense. Mathematics don't add up. And I thought white people were good at math. But he didn't throw in these numbers. He threw a whole lot of curveball. I said this dissertation was for white people, so white people can sleep good. Because I guess they're seeing movies like the Django Unchained and 12 Years a Slave and so forth. And that they had to, you know what I'm saying, they had to scramble, you know what I'm saying, to revise history. Now, when I did my research on black slave owners, and that was fascinating. A lot of black dudes that owned slaves didn't own that many, maybe 1 or 2, and it was people that they knew. So hence, a freedman would work just to buy his wife, or a freeman would work or just to buy his kids, or to buy his cousin, to buy his brother, to get them free. They only bought their freedom. They didn't really own them as slaves, but they got all that misconstrued. He did not say that in his video. And literally, and I hope he's watching this fucking video, literally he just said there's 20. He didn't elaborate in his, he made some kind of misconstrued number. Also, the major plantation owners, there was a guy named John Carruthers Stanley. He owned 3 slave plantations. He owned a lot of slaves. And I'm like, okay, this is a black guy. You know what I'm saying? He's a predominant slave driver. But then I read, and then he's talking about, well, he went into debt because he co-signed a loan for his white half brother. So his brother, you know what I'm saying, maybe 2 different mothers or 2 different fathers was white. That means John Carruthers Stanley was a mulatto. You know, and that's the thing. So a lot of these guys are going to talk about these black slave owners. You have to be specific. Were they black or were they mulatto? In the slave days, mulattoes were looked different from black people. That's why today I will agree that mixed people aren't black. Because as long as we keep saying that Halle Berry and Thandi Nilsson are black and shit like that, white people are going to use that against us to talk about all the black slave owners and so forth. No, a lot of slaves were mulatto, and mulattoes did have certain privileges and so forth. They may have been called a nigger here and there, but we all know that places like Louisiana, especially in the Caribbean islands, mulattoes had a lot of power. And you know what I'm saying? And I think one of the main reasons was, when you look at these photos of these old slaves, majority of them seemed, even with black and white photo, they seemed dark black. A lot of them was coming from sub-Saharan African. They weren't mixed with Arabs yet, and they was dark black. So the stark difference between a dark black person and mulatto would look different. See, back in those days, dudes, my skin complexion wasn't, you know what I'm saying, wasn't normal. You know what I'm saying? And when more and more light-skinned people, I'm not saying I'm light-skinned, but light-skinned people with green eyes or whatever, was coming out of the wound of black parents, and white people couldn't, they like, hey, is he mixed or he's not? He's kind of light-skinned, he's kind of tannish color, he's kind of a peanut butter complexion. That's when they had to throw in that 10% rule. They said, oh, I can't find out who's mulatto, who's all the way black, or who's black and Indian, so we're just going to say 10%. But in the olden days, it was pretty obvious. You know what I'm saying? A mixed person would just stand out too much among other black people, and so therefore they can, and that's why that in a book I read, The Talented Tenth was considered mulatto. And even the 1915 movie, Birth of a Nation, a movie that glorified the Ku Klux Klan, and there was a mulatto in that movie. See, the thing is, the stereotype of mulattoes back then, especially mulatto women, was they were very seductive. They used to seduce white men. They were very crafty and manipulative. I think that's false, because I think a lot of white men were fucking the mulatto chicks. And then they would turn around and say, hey, she seduced me, she's crafty and so forth. But in the movie, A Birth of a Nation, it was a white person, just a regular white female playing the role of a mulatto. But you have to know the, you know what I'm saying, the stereotype or you know what I'm saying, the onlook of mulattoes at that time to recognize that this white woman's playing a mulatto. Because, you know, that movie was so racist, they had white people in black faces playing the slaves and so forth. So, it was a, that was just a known fact. So he misconstrued the whole thing about black slave owners. One, black slave owners, they bought slaves only for their freedom, so they had put them in a cotton field. Two, you know what I'm saying, a lot of them was mulattoes. Mulattoes simply thought they was better. That's why you never saw mulattoes in the field. Now, I'm not saying that every slave that worked in the house was light-skinned, because, you know, if somebody can cook fried chicken, they can cook fried chicken. If they're a good worker, or sometimes when a slave is too old, the master will have them work in the house, even if they're dark-skinned. But mulattoes, they were in the house, man, I don't know, 99% of the time. If there was a mulatto picking cotton, he must have pissed the master off and so forth. I'm like, even Paula Deen, that racist white bitch, which Tommy Sotomayor and Painless Risen ran to her defense, even stated that she liked the light-skinned blacks to work the door and in the front, and the dark-skinned blacks to work in the basement or in the kitchen. That comes from her own mouth. But now we're going to go into, he goes into white slavery. You know what I'm saying? We go into white slavery and the Irish. Now this goes into a thing called, I consider the suffering card. Now people say, you like to play the race card? Then there's a thing, and I got a video I'm going to make called the suffering card, where people can pull out their suffering card. Somehow when black people pull out our suffering card, they're like, oh, slavery's over and this and that. But Jews and Irish people can do it all the time. And also, this also creates another conundrum, that if they keep talking to this about slavery's over 150 years ago, don't dwell on it, then why the fuck are white people trying to go back, you know what I'm saying, reorganize slavery, alter history and so forth? You know what I'm saying, like Marty McFly in a goddamn time machine, Back to the Future or whatever. So if slavery's over, then why don't white people forget about it too? Why do white people have to go in back and say, hey, well, us white people, you know, blacks did, and no, you know. So it's just crazy. I'm like, these are some very contradictory, hypocritical people. But we're going to go into the white slavery thing. And the thing is with white slavery, with these Irish slaves and serfdom, I'm not going to say they didn't exist, but a lot of the white slaves, as you've seen in that movie, 12 Years a Slave, they'll come in the game picking cotton, then they become an overseer and so forth. They'll pick cotton just to get to know. And yes, at a certain time there were wars, but they had the slave. This is where race comes in. Race and science comes in. And you know what I'm saying? So here in America, they said all men were free, but they couldn't have slaves. So then it was like, oh well, if you have all these white slaves run. White people are excellent record keepers. So that's why I say they document a lot of things. And you know what I'm saying? And it's very easy to get information about slavery because it's very well documented. They still got papers and receipts and so forth. But when it comes to this Irish slavery, this white slavery was so horrible here in America. You know what I'm saying? Why is the records about it flimsy? Why haven't they made any movies about it and so forth? I'm like, these white people, they think that the government is against them. They think Hollywood is against them. They think the media is against them, and that the media made these lies to, you know what I'm saying, to stroke the egos of black people and Afrocentrics. I'm like, the government and I'm like, white people are known for whitewashing history. You know what I mean? And they've done. So hence, now they're trying to go and they're trying to whitewash slavery. It's like, first white people used the fact that they captured black people as slaves as a part of their superiority. Yeah, we were just superior. They were monkeys living in mud huts, throwing dung at each other. We captured them because we were superior people. We had superior technology and so forth. Now they're trying to go back and say, well, you know, most of the slaves. I'm like, literally, watch this dude's fucking video. He literally says most of the slaves were white, and he says that black slaves had more values than white slaves. That when the Irish people got killed or whatever, they didn't care. They was like, oh, that's just a patty, but a black slave. And then he replied, no, I couldn't find any information on this, and so forth. And just like with Irish slavery, with this white slavery and so forth, there's no pictures, not much literature. Like, why don't they got Hollywood on their site. Why don't they just come out with a good slave movie with white people here in America? I understand it existed in Europe because Europe was a shithole. That's why white people got the fuck out of Europe and and went to America, even if, you know what I'm saying, before shit was built up, when there was nothing but timberwolves running around and Native Americans that was sculpted, and they would have still took their chances. They was like, anywhere's better than here. But yeah. But he also said that slavery did not have much of an economic impact and growth. Once again, more fallacies. As I said, now, how can this guy expect a black person to sit there and digest this putrid garbage? You know what I'm saying? Even an Uncle, you know what I'm saying, I want to use this term, Uncle Ruckus bootlegger has to say that this guy is full of shit. You know, slavery did. I'm like, slavery, I'm like, cotton, that's the main reason why the British, you know what I'm saying, wanted to abolish slavery and capture slave boats or find slave boats coming to the America to stop America's economic growth, you know, and so forth. Now, he also said one thing too, like for instance, a lot of white people say that only a small number of white people had slaves. I'm like, okay, but then how was slavery reinforced as an institution? Couldn't these slaves easily just kill their slave masters or run off the plantation? So therefore, you had to have a force. It's just like working inside a jail cell or penitentiary. We know the inmates outnumber the COs. You know what I'm saying? They can even with the COs when they have access to guns. And really, in jail, it's hard to get access to guns. They're in a prison. They're locked away. And you know what I'm saying? We only carried bean bags and so forth, unless we go out to transport. Now, but the inmates can very easily overcome a jail, overcome the officers, take over the jail, and a lot of them have. But they'll have to deal with outside forces, the police force, the SWAT teams, you know what I'm saying, surrounding whatever, bounty hunter, armed security guards or whatever that they'll bring in, sheriffs, deputy sheriffs will all surround that force. So you got this force. That's the thing with black people, you had this force or whatever, you know what I'm saying, reinforced slavery, that even if they get away from the slave masters, they had the dogs, and then they'll have to deal with all these hucklebucks and these dudes that go around capturing slavery for profit. Now, he made another lie. He said, well, yeah, he said that the government used to have these forced slave patrols, and that the average white person hated slavery or whatever, couldn't stand slavery. And maybe they did, but they also hated blacks. He did not incorporate the whole, you know what I'm saying, them hating blacks type thing. So when he was when a slave ran away, they said that the government used to force these slave patrols, and these white people hated going on slave patrol to capture slaves and so forth. And sometimes they'll take their hate on the slaves. My thing is like that, if you're forced to do some kind of slave patrol duty, if you actually see a slave running through the bushes, why would you report him? You just let him go. You're like, I hate doing this. I hate doing slave patrol or whatever. I see a slave, I'm going to let him run and pretend that he's not a slave. I'm like, come on now. And then he said the dudes did not get paid for capturing slaves. That's a freaking lie. You know what I'm saying? The slave owner of the plantation reward handsomely for a slave. And a lot of these times, so it was about, once he said it was about power over people. And that's the thing. The white man, even the smelly, you know what I'm saying, dirty nailed, decayed tooth hicks enjoyed their privilege and power over another person. They enjoyed this savagery of them being able to capture a runaway black slave, whether it's man or female, and having sex with them, you know, raping them or whatever, and then just handing them back to the slave masters, like, here, you know what I'm saying? So he'll get pussy and he'll get paid. You know what I'm saying? So I can imagine but he doesn't incorporate the white man's racism and so forth. Black people went through the psychological damage and so forth. And so he said, oh, they hate the slave pro, and then he blamed everything on the government. So, well, it's about this government. I'm like, no, the Southern government wanted to secede from the North because they wanted to keep their slaves, you know, and so forth. And then even though a lot of these white people were poor and couldn't afford slaves themselves, they were stupid and they enjoyed their white superiority, because at the same time they was coming up with new concepts about race, and that there was an upper race, there was a superior race. So, you know, white people felt that they were superior to blacks and Indians and so forth. So they enjoyed it, even though they were dirt poor, that was something they could have. You know what I'm saying? And so it was hard. So that's how they kept the slaves in check, even though a lot of them ran away. And still, but he can't just blame it on the government. And also, a lot of the poor whites, they had dreams of one day becoming slave owners. Maybe they won't own a whole plantation or whatever, but they'll be able to own 1 or 2 slaves to work around the house and so forth. But you know, it's kind of like the way things they are. They were told this was the order, that the black man was under the white man, and that if, you know what I'm saying, the North was going to abolish slavery and get rid of a whole lot of other things that they like doing and so forth, like having sex with their cousins or whatever. But yeah, so that. And also going into the Irish thing, the slave, and here's something, you know, all the slaves that were, you know what I'm saying, the Irish, why did they lose their names? You know what I'm saying? Why do they still got the names? See, the difference between African Americans and Africans, we lost our names. We got different names than them and so forth. We may have the same names of Africans who grew up in a slave colony like Jamaica, but in Africa, where supposedly we come from, we got different names. We got different languages. Hence, Irish people here in America got the same names and the same language that they have over there in Ireland. So this whole theory that the white Irish had it so hard fell apart because they did not use their name, they did not use their culture, nor that they were broken. Also, after slavery was ended, abolished here in America, we had the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, I'm going by this guy's theory that, you know what I'm saying, the average poor white person, you know what I'm saying, was against slavery. Then why would the rise was the Ku Klux Klan? One of the main reasons why the Ku Klux Klan gained power is that, one, you know what I'm saying, that they didn't want blacks to have power, to gain control, and fear that they're losing their way of life. And a lot of these Klansmen was poor white people that didn't have slaves in the first place. And then how would this dude go about talk about, you know what I'm saying, all the lynchings that happened and what we went through after slavery and so forth. So hence, one person would see how racist white people were today and assume that they were extremely racist in those years and so forth. So we want to, okay, you want me to believe that white people weren't that racist and that the Jews and the liberal meters have lied to us about history and so forth to benefit black people. And white people get all the benefits, perks of today. So why would the government, the media, or whatever lie about slavery and so forth? You know what I'm saying? To make white people seem shameful. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make any sense. Now this video has been running long enough. But check out his video. But thanks for watching. It's Sally Forth.